Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz. I feel like this episode might be philosophically the most important episode I have published to date. Eric Barnum and I pick up right where I left off in episode 18 when I claimed that students should lose the net when learning to sight read. The psychological principle at play is a term coined by Nassim Taleb called Anti-Fragility, referring to systems that require stress in order to improve. What processes in the choral rehearsal can apply the right amount of stress in your singers in order to make them stronger and better? Today's episode is a little bit different than some of my other episodes. I'm going to keep the intro very short because while this episode is mostly brought to you by Graphite Publishing, as I announced last month, is now an affiliate on the show. Our listeners can get 10% off at checkout on the awesome publications at Graphite Publishing, and we are also doing a monthly segment now called the Composer Exposer. Well, with this episode, we get a double whammy. Eric Barnum is the guest to talk about anti-fragility and the concept and how that applies in choir, but while he's with me, we get to do a Composer Exposer episode as well. So stay tuned for this episode and be sure to check out Eric's music as well as music of Jocelyn Hagan, Tim Takash, Joshua Shank, and many more on graphitepublishing.com and use that 10% off promo code Choralosophy that you've come to know and love on that website at checkout. Okay, I'm here with Eric Barnum. Eric is the next victim of the Composer Exposer. Eric, welcome. Are you ready to be exposed?
Yes, sir. I'm ready. Thanks for having me on, Chris. This is great. I'm glad to be here. Let's have fun.
All right, let's do it.
Fly.
Sparks will fly. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
I'm in.
Okay. If you had the world's attention for 30 seconds, so let's pretend like people listen to this podcast. If you had the world's attention for 30 seconds, what would you say?
You want me to be honest?
That's kind of, have you listened to this?
I might start singing a little song, and it goes something like this. Jesus loves me, this I know. I might do that. If I had the whole world's attention, absolutely I might. I don't know.
That would suck them in. I like that. Where's a place that you don't mind waiting?
Where I don't mind waiting, weirdly enough, is before a concert. I'm fine. I don't get nervous, I think. I don't worry about it. I don't know. It just feels comfortable to wait for the concert to happen and just be at peace before that event. But if I'm waiting to get a driver's license, then I'm freaking out or something. It's so bizarre. So
concert time is Zen time.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
that's great. I don't know. It's sort of, it should be the opposite, but it's not.
So if you could close one fast food chain because their food sucks, which one would it be? You get to show up with a letter from the state saying you are hereby closed. I'm not a big fan of McDonald's, honestly. I'm really not. I'm not a big fan of Wendy's either. Wendy's is kind of bad. Would you leave your hometown forever or stay in your hometown forever, and those are your only two choices?
Absolutely leave.
Okay.
Leave my hometown forever.
What's your hometown?
Sorry, people from my hometown.
And McDonald's. Sorry, McDonald's people.
Yeah, sorry, McDonald's. Don't sue the Choralosophy podcast. Or maybe you should.
I mean, yeah, I painted you into a corner and made you choose. So all those folks from Little Ericville, it don't take it personally. Okay, last one.
Please don't.
Last one of the rapid fire round.
Yep.
What part of your body could use some lotion right now?
I'm going to play it safe, Chris. I'm going to play it safe right now and say the back of my hands because they get dry.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Safe.
All right, you survived.
This is a family show, Chris.
It is. I can always toggle the explicit versus clean part for each episode. That works. Yep. All right, so thanks for partaking in that. That's always a risk because I don't let you see the questions ahead of time. You survived.
Can I ask you a rapid fire question?
Sure.
All right. What is, I'm just thinking this up right now. What's the worst thing you've ever stepped on?
The worst thing I've ever stepped on. Oh, easily a fish hook with a bare foot on a boat while fishing. Um, that
Oh,
was barbed the whole thing, and so trying to get it back out the other end was,
oh.
yeah, it was bad.
Did
It was
you
bad.
get a
I was
tetanus
probably,
shot?
oh yeah, I was probably 11. But
Okay.
I can remember it. Like, I mean, I became
All
an
right.
adult. I became an adult on that day, Eric.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, that was it.
Was there blood?
Oh
Who
yeah,
got it out? What,
yeah.
you're like your dad? Did your dad get it
My
out?
dad
Yeah.
got it out. Actually, it might have been my grandpa, but some old man got it out. Yeah,
Some old guy.
some old guy I'm related to intimately, I
That's
guess.
right. Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's talk about graphite. We're gonna you publish quite a bit of stuff on graphite publishing, and I've got a few of your scores from there before, but I want to hear what, if there was one piece on there that you love that means something to you, that you just want as many choir directors as you possibly can to know about it. Of course, like, we know that it might be because people might buy it, but like, what's your passion score on there?
Well, can I set this up a little bit?
Sure.
To say first, very lucky to have a connection with graphite. I was lucky enough to know them even before graphite, and got a chance to talk to Jocelyn and Tim about graphite even before it was made, and feel lucky to be a part of this. And graphite to me is a place where I don't mean to throw the entire American publishing company scene under the bus, but it's a place where a person like me can publish things that in many ways are deemed unpublishable
Mm-hmm.
by the powers. There's a piece on graphite called Corpus Christi Carol, and it has a poem that's deemed too bloody. And the reason why is that it's the Corpus Christi Carol, which has a text talking about dogs licking the blood from the night. That was, this old anonymous poem. And yeah, it's a bit bloody to say, because it has the word blood in it.
Yeah, well, I'll say, since you don't want to name a favorite, I will.
Go ahead.
Your In Paradisum on there is just, it's so juicy.
It's juicy.
That it's beautiful. It's like,
Thank you.
it's just, yeah. We did it in Contrarian, and it was a huge audience favorite. Like, we've probably done it 2 or 3 times.
Oh,
And
thank you.
find that one on graphite, and it's just a stunning piece. But I would agree with you in your assessment that it's probably meatier. Some of your stuff on there is meatier
Yes.
stuff you're going to find on the traditional publishers. So definitely people should head over there and check it out.
Thank you. Before we start, what I was thinking of today was, have you ever seen one of those videos of 2 galaxies like coming together slowly, and then what happens after they crash? That's you and me. The stars are just going to fling out tonight.
We are galaxies unto ourselves. I think that is true.
I'm more of a galaxy than you, I think, but that's because I love hamburgers.
Oh, so am I a nebula? Is a nebula? I don't even know. I don't know science words.
You're less of a galaxy than I am. That's all.
Okay.
That's all we need to know.
We might have to.
And we're talking weight, probably.
Oh, okay. Well, we might have to schedule a debate episode later for whether or not which of us is the more of a galaxy. We'll have to. We'll talk about that at the end.
No.
Right.
So anyway.
Okay. So Eric, start us off a little bit further back in your life. Now, we've heard a little bit about some of your music and some of the things that you've published, but who is little Eric? What got you from the little Eric in the town you never want to go back to, all the way to the choir director / composer that you are today?
Okay, wait. We can't. People from Crookston. I did not say that. I did not do that. People from my hometown, I love you. So when I was growing up, I think a couple things happened that are instrumental. My parents made me take piano lessons, and when they did, they were the type of parents that would set a timer on the piano, and you had to practice for that amount of time. And I think more so my brothers than I, but even if you started crying, you had to sit there until the timer went off. So I somehow cried less and practiced more, I think, and then just developed a love for piano. I think piano music, and I, chose an instrument in fifth grade and did joined choir and all that stuff, and then played piano for the choir and stuff like that. And I think we had a very normal high school experience for somebody in the late 80s, early 90s. I just seen, looking back on it now and having done a lot of clinics around the country, yeah, it was just a very normal high school music scene. It was a smaller town, so we had more opportunities to do more things. I think more variety. I should say that probably plays a role too, is that I got to explore more. I feel like today kids are having to focus more, I think, because of just time. I don't know how we did it back then, where
And
it seems
Adderall.
like I was in everything. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I was, or I tried to be. Wasn't somehow I could play sports and be in the musical. I don't know how it happened, and then also choir and band and marching band, and so just to say that I I was developing I was developing some talent and a taste for it. Certainly, I had no idea the greater world. I mean, we were a small town and not doing particularly difficult things. I think the hardest thing that we sang in high school was John Rutter's Te Deum, which was a big deal. Uh, that was the big deal for like in a 3-year span. Woo, we did that piece. But it was just a normal time, and I tried to get really good at piano. But I remember deciding what we're going to do, and we're all supposed to decide when we're 18 what we're going to do with our life. So I did, and that wasn't music. I decided to go get a degree in graphic design with an emphasis in model building, which I don't know if you've seen Zoolander, but model building is building the tiny library for kids that don't read good from Zoolander. You
But
just
but
remember
ideally
that?
more functional.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No.
Making sure.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, it's what, for those of you in the audience that really care, they're the people that build the cool models after the architect designs the building. Okay. So that's what I went to get a degree in. It was but what I ended up doing was join the choir as the only thing that I kept doing. I was okay, I'm going to do this other thing, but I'm going to join the choir. Which, by the way, I say to everyone, you should do that, no matter your degree.
Sing in
When
choir.
you are a freshman, sing in the choir.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what. Don't just stop. Anyway, so I sang in the choir, and that year not only happened to be the retirement of somebody pretty well respected in the choral field. His name was Paul Brandbick. His claim to fame was that he did all the Madrigal Dinner books and texts and all the. So if you've done a Madrigal Dinner, you have seen his name, Paul Brandbick. But in his final year, he took the choir to Europe. Okay, and this was also at a time, let's say 1999, that it was insanely more cheap to go. Okay, so we were able to go for almost 3 weeks for the same price that it is about, or half price of what it is to go for a week now. It's just crazy. So anyway, when I was 19 years old, I got a chance to sing in Crazyville cathedrals. In my opinion, I mean, looking back, it was a very normal college choir, but at the time I was peeing my pants. It was so good to me. And sort of the real moment in my life that made me say, I think I have should change my mind about choral music to put it on top rather than just be a part would be singing in Chartres Cathedral. So Chartres, outside of Paris. It was the last concert we did. And I remember us singing the Holz Nunc Dimittis. And the end of that piece, if you haven't heard it, just YouTube it. Or if you have heard it, remember the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's just spectacular. The ending is so wonderful. It's glorious. And we sang this concert at the end of the day. And Chartres Cathedral is known for these amazing amazing rose windows and some of the best windows in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun was starting to shine down, and we're singing this piece, singing the end of it, and he started to cry. And some of the people around me started to cry. We weren't trying, we made it through the piece. But when I looked at him and he was crying, or he was starting to tear up, I thought, there's something about that that's different. I think that's what I would like. I thought it wasn't even about, even in the moment, I didn't think he's crying because it sounds so good. There's something else that's running through his mind while he's conducting. Something about the meaning of it all, the meaning of 30 years of teaching all these people. And here it is, the culmination is culminating in Holz Nunc Dimittis.
Something existential was happening.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And he was experiencing it. And
Yep.
I said, that is probably going to be more fulfilling than a lot of other things. And I think that's what I would like. So I went home and changed my major, essentially immediately. And I thought at the time that I'd change it to music ed, because that's the normal way you do these things. And I went to the first music ed class and then changed my major again and said, I can't do this. That's what I was thinking. I can't do it. I can't do it. So I changed my major to vocal performance and I had no idea what I was going to do after that, except I still loved choir. And then I won't tell the story here, but I tell the story to any kid that asks about how I started composing. And that happened about a year later. I didn't even start composing until I was 20, 21. And sort of through a tragic circumstance, decided to cathartically emote via writing music rather than just performing it.
Mm-hmm.
And something clicked. And this is what I say to every person going to get an undergrad degree is, half of you have no idea what you're even good at. You don't know because you haven't even tried. So leave the box open, because out of nowhere, you could be really good at something, down the road.
And you're bad at things you think you're good at.
Absolutely. Well, that's a classic undergrad right there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's sort of the origin story. The origin is having a nice background, pretty normal background, I would say. Lots of practicing, lots and lots and lots of practicing. A love of certain things that really helped out, a love of math, a love of reading, a love of poetry. And those things just sort of built together, whether I knew it or not, were cycling in the background to build towards what I thought was something that it just was a little wind in the road. And then it came back to probably what it should have been all along. But I think we all need that in a way, is to find it in our own way. And that was my way, was to take a little, say, I'm tired of this, and then to come back and see it fresh, to see it like, oh, it means more than I thought it did. It isn't just about practicing and performing. There's something else going on in teaching, especially.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, you tell us a little bit more about, for those of you listening to my show or have been listening to this show, you know that I listen to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. Eric co-hosts a podcast called The Choral Contrarians. Tell us that story. How did that come about?
I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, regional convention. I don't remember the year. I'm sorry. It was a great conference. I don't remember the year. So memorable. There was somebody there that I had never met, and his name was Richard Robbins. And he had just took the job at University of Wisconsin Superior, and I was the conductor at University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. Weirdly, it was just simpatico. We shared a lot of similar opinions about a lot of things that are happening in the choral world right now. Some similar philosophical background ideas. We like some of the same authors, and that they influence not only how we teach, but how we think about music. And what we discovered was that in many ways, it seemed like we were individually having a contrarian view to the larger scene.
Okay.
And so we said, hey, let's just start talking more often. And I think maybe it was a year and a half ago that I said, you know what, I'm gaining a lot from this. What if we decided to just force ourselves to do it all the time? Something that already was happening organically via the phone. And I said, well, neither of us know what we're doing. Let's just do what we do, only record ourselves doing it. And so that was the birth of what we call the Choral Contrarians podcast. I wanted to call us, what did I say? Altar Boys with a Z. Altar Boys, because he's devotedly Catholic, and he didn't let that fly. So we had to come up with another name.
I think you chose the right name.
I think so too. Altar Boys. No, we didn't do that. So we called ourselves the Choral Contrarians, and we're finding it fun to do. We will probably start a second season. I guess we'll go season to season. We've done it a year. We have like 16 episodes. The appeal is that it's for people that really want to dig in deeper, but also it's more than just the appeal, and selfishly so. It's just letting people listen in to two guys talking about something.
Yeah. Well, the way
really
I've listened to every episode. I love it.
Thank you.
And one of the things that I find interesting, and then people who listen to this show, if you haven't come across it, you should go check it out. But one of the things I think you'll find interesting if you enjoy choralosophy is that what you guys do is you seem to talk about very similar strain of ideas that I do on this show, but because you're, as you described, you kind of have this nerd partner in Richard that can you have this rapport back and forth. It's just the two of you each time.
Yep.
So what I do on this show is I try to talk about a lot of those things too, but I'm bringing on people that I've never spoken with before.
That's right.
It's a different kind of
dynamic,
totally different dynamic. And so what tends to happen is when I dive into these issues on my show, they tend to be more like how those issues are affecting the choir world of the person I'm talking to, and then how it intersects with my world. So it's a little bit closer to the classroom.
Yep.
You might say.
Absolutely.
Whereas when you listen to the Choral Contrarians, you're hearing kind of like the very philosophical underpinnings, and you guys bring on a lot of like actual reading quotes from a lot of the philosophers and the different people. Whereas I don't do that so much on my show. It's kind of like talking about how that philosophy affects you and how that philosophy affects me. So I think that's kind of cool. So my prescription to everyone is to listen to both shows.
They probably should.
Because
Yeah.
Then you'll get the full picture.
For everybody, all you choralosophers out there too, there will be a show this season where Chris joins us, and we're going to give him almost no time to think about it too, and we can't wait.
Good.
So it's going to be.
That's how I roll.
The other thing about I think what's great about the difference between our podcasts is that I love that there is some sort of practicality to it, whereas that was never our goal or point, was to necessarily be practical at all.
But the really deeply philosophical ones, they are only approaching a certain type of podcast listener.
That's right.
Because not everybody listens to podcasts for the same reason. Here's a funny story. So my last one that I just put out, which had no guest at all, it was just me talking about how to teach sight reading for an hour.
Yes.
Has been by far my most popular episode. It's been already viewed probably 4 times more than even my episode with Jason Ferdinand right after ACDA.
Not surprised.
And which I was actually. I was surprised.
Oh, you were?
Yes,
okay.
I was surprised. I was expecting that people would like it because it's practical and you'd get that. But that, like, it's just me talking. So, like, who cares? Well, I'm bringing on all these people that everybody knows and everybody's excited about. And I wanted to talk a little bit about ways that you think a couple of issues you touched on, which were passions of mine in the show, could be brought a little bit closer to the classroom.
Great.
Some things that the teachers could actually do if they value these things. And one of them was one of your very first episodes, maybe second or third, which was called the Anti-Fragile Choir, I think is what you called it.
Yep.
So I'm very familiar with Nassim Taleb's term Anti-Fragility. I'm very familiar with Jonathan Haidt's research in his book, The Coddling of the American Mind, that talks a lot about that. It's
Great
a fantastic book for any educator to read or understand.
Yeah.
Why don't you, since you did a whole podcast on it already, just kind of tell my listeners what it means to be anti-fragile?
I think even Nassim Taleb did this in one of his talks where he said, okay, just imagine you have a glass cup, okay? And it's on a table and you push it off the table, okay? When it hits the ground and it shatters, which we're all familiar with, that's what's called fragile. The glass is fragile. Now imagine that you had the same glass and you pushed it over the edge, and when it fell, it didn't break. It just hit the ground and was fine. That would be called robust. It's robust. It will last. And then imagine, though, which is hard. This is what's next. This is amazing and really difficult to imagine. Imagine that after you push the glass over and it hit the ground, it became a better glass. So it did exactly the opposite of break. Somehow it became better. And that's what anti-fragile would be. And is it perfect? No, but it's a good introduction to the topic. So if you could push your choir off of a cliff, I'm just kidding, and they didn't break but got better, which I often want to do, is push my choir off a cliff.
Yeah, so they all of a sudden can sight read when they land.
Okay, no, great. Sight reading is a wonderful example of sight reading. To me, is the best and easiest example to make a entity or a community anti-fragile. Do certain things, and the way that I like to say it was inflict harm, which is like do things that it's not about purposely damaging, but almost thinking about that way, where you're choosing to do certain things that aren't necessarily a lot of fun, but can inflict enough harm to give them a resistance profile to harm.
Yep.
It is in a weird way like vaccinating, okay?
Yeah,
vaccinations is another wonderful way to think about anti-fragility.
I want to add something to your explanation there with the glasses.
Great. Yes. Great. Yeah.
The reason Taleb decided to make that distinction and try to create that term is because his whole point was we don't have a word for that in English.
Yeah.
We have a word for the cup that falls off and breaks. We have a word for the cup that falls off the table and does not break and just stays the same. But we don't have a word for something that is broken, damaged, and then comes back better. But we do have things in our universe and our world that operate that way. So his argument is that we need to have a word. And so the word that he came up with was anti-fragile. So other examples, the immune system, of course, is anti-fragile.
That might be even better, Chris. I think that might be even better. Yeah.
Human bones.
Yes.
Human bones are anti-fragile. In fact, the sight reading example you were just kind of hinting at. Here's how I would think of it: is if our and this was actually my most recent episode, which I made a pretty forceful took a forceful stand in that episode that choir directors have got to stop playing notes for kids. Got to stop playing notes for kids. If they are reading along with someone playing the piano, they are not sight reading. They are following someone, an auditory external driver, which
within milliseconds.
Within milliseconds,
right.
but our brains are smart enough to do that. So we are following and not reading. And so the connection there to me is the human bone one. If you walk around with a leg brace on when you don't need it for 5 years and then take it off, you will fall. Because during the growth during that 5 years, the bones were not allowed to endure stress by holding up the full weight of your body, so they will atrophy. Our bones get stronger as we age. They get stronger even if they break and then reheal. They're able to reheal. They come back stronger. So, and I love that you tied that to sight reading, because that's actually, I agree. That's my favorite example in choir of ways to create an anti-fragile choir, is to teach them to read.
Yes.
So
I mean, let me just say this again too. What does it mean to practice sight reading? Practice sight reading in a weird way is like adding a vaccine to your body. You know, you're adding something or you're doing something. Does it have any? Could you get by without it? Without sight reading? Could you do it? Could you do a performance, something amazing, without sight reading?
We couldn't do what we do at my school without it.
Well, I mean, you could prepare a choir and never practice sight reading, couldn't you? I mean, at some point,
you could. You would have to.
You could learn by rote, or something.
You'd have to do less repertoire and different repertoire, and
But when you sight read, or you put yourself to the fire, I mean, that's what sight reading really is. I mean, sight reading is scary. Real sight reading, not like the pansy sight reading, but actually, like when you don't have a net sight reading. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like you said, take the piano away, and you've got leaps and bounds, and you start to challenge them with interesting stuff. Like, what if you made your choir sight read a Bach chorale from the Riemschneider every other week or every week? You just hand it out. Hey, everybody, we're going to read this. Not in German, but just on, and whatever, either solfege or not. It doesn't. I think it would even be fun for you to take away solfege and say, "Can you read this?" By just seeing it, by just trying, and failing. That was the other thing about Anti-Fragility that matters. It's a close tie to something we talked about later in our podcast, which is hedonic adaptation, where it's when you fail, you're more capable of handling not only failure in the future, but you're capable of, it's practice. You're just practicing. You're practicing getting better as a musician, as a human being, as a person that can sing better and take risks and read better in the future. Everything becomes faster. So that's why sight reading to me is like a vaccine for the future, to get, it helps you get better later.
Yeah, absolutely. I also I see that the anti-fragility concept and philosophy is also very tied to Carol Dweck's growth mindset philosophy. If you ever come across that, it's the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. Are you familiar with that book at all?
Not really, no.
Okay, so
I'll have to look it up.
She's a psychologist, and she's got about 15 years or so of research that went into this one book called The Growth Mindset. And it is, it's very similar. Her language doesn't use anti-fragility language. It's just, but you can tell that it's different, or that it's the same in the sense that they both ideas reward the concept in the learner that you will fail, and that the failure itself is necessary for you to be able to grow. So a student with a growth mindset would be somebody um, whose motto in a rehearsal in a choir context would be, I've got to learn this music at all costs.
Yes.
Whereas a fixed mindset person is more likely to say, I need to look like I know this music at all costs.
Mm.
Meaning it's important for a fixed mindset person to show that they're smart.
Mm.
Whereas, and so they will avoid failure because they might put themselves in a position where they might not look smart. And so you might have come across this too. You're a dad now, right? You've got
Yep.
little ones. How old are they?
5 and 2.
5 and 2. So Carol Dweck says that you should never praise your children for being smart.
Got it.
Never.
Don't worry, kids.
Right.
I don't.
So so the research, right?
I'm kidding.
Mine are 11 and 7, and I read this book like 3 or 4 years ago, and of course I'd been telling my kids when they exhibited smartness, but after reading this book, I've completely changed my lingo with not only my students but also my bio kids, because essentially her point was that if you tell a kid that really cool thing they just did, like sight read this Bach chorale,
Yeah, sure.
is because they are such great sight readers. You guys are so smart. You guys, man, it's just amazing that you did that. They will feel good about the compliment in the short term, but then what happens when you put something in front of them that they crash and burn on 2 days later?
That's right.
Well, if their success was because their inherent smartness, then their failure logically would be because I guess they're not as smart as my teacher said I was.
Mm.
And whereas if that first time they nail that Bach chorale, you say something like, "You guys, my goodness, that was excellent. We've put some work in on this, haven't we? Your this sight reading thing. We've worked on this. This that.
Yeah.
Thank,
Right.
Thank you for your work." Then what you're doing is you're praising the process and that they went through to get to that point. And then if they fail, because they will at some other thing later, then you can go back and talk about what part of the process did we not hit? What do we need to do for next time? And so I think I see ties between that idea and the anti-fragility idea, where you start to become more comfortable in your own skin with failure. And
let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's try this one on for size. Let's say they sang that chorale. Could you say something to the effect of like, you can congratulate them for sight reading well. I mean, that's allowed in this, right? Just say, wow, great job sight reading. And then you could say something to the effect of, let's try something harder next time. Could you say that?
Actually, she has a great one. I laughed out loud at this one because I love it. But she said, if you give a student something that's too easy, rather than talking about how it's too easy because they're so smart, you can say things like, "Wow, I'm sorry I wasted your time with that one. Let's do something that really challenges you." Right?
Let's get that lead home out and sight read something atonal next time.
Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,
I think either way, I think the main point to the anti-fragility thing and this thing is that we shouldn't be afraid to. Again, it sounds so bad. I got to figure out how to change the language, but inflict harm. And what I mean by that is give things that are hard. It doesn't have to be candy and lollipops and feel good all the time. That includes, in my opinion, literature, another one I was going to say, but sorry, really quick,
you're fine,
would be one way to create an anti-fragile choir is to program differently. Just program differently. Program different stuff that isn't necessarily fun all the time. I know it's a big joke to say, we got to eat our vegetables, so let's do a Renaissance piece. But no, what if vegetables was some weird Benjamin Britten tune that's really hard to sing? Or what if eating your vegetables was singing a Messiaen? Or
some of the weirder niche stuff.
That's right. No. And, there's an accomplishment there, by the way. When they're done and they feel accomplished, they will be more anti-fragile. I
Uh-huh.
remember when I was an undergrad, and this same guy that I was telling you about earlier, Paul Brandvik, one of the pieces that we did on that freshman tour was Ives Psalm 96. Sorry, somebody's going to know and embarrass me. But it was an Ives Psalm, and I hated it. I hated every minute of rehearsing it. I hated our performances of it. Um, it was polytonal, you know. It wasn't. It just every minute of it I hated. And I'll tell you, looking back, it's a memory to me, and I treasure that memory now. To say I was better at the end of that,
Hmm.
and even though I didn't love the sound, I was so much better as a musician, and just because I had the opportunity to struggle. I mean, it was a huge struggle for me personally, not only emotionally but musically. I mean, it was just so hard for me
Yeah.
at the time. And so I just want to challenge. I mean, it would be so wonderful to go to a convention and hear more variety and more things happening, and people challenging their singers. Not It doesn't mean necessarily to even sing harder stuff. How cool would it be to have a pro choir get up there and do a unison piece? You know, I'm just saying it doesn't have to be that idiotic. I'm just saying it's good to challenge. That was the whole concept of the
Mhm.
anti-fragility.
Yeah, and let's dive into that language that you use too, because I think you're right that some people would probably be turned off to the concept if you say you have to harm your students.
No, and
And I
that's not
know
what I mean.
no, and
Yeah,
I know
right.
you don't. Because I totally understand. I've read the book. I've I know what you mean. But let's talk
Yeah,
about that just for the person who doesn't know what we mean. When you say
yeah,
inflict harm, I think what we're really saying is you are, as an educator,
yes.
intentionally putting your students in a position where they are not able to settle into a comfort zone all of the time.
Thank you, Chris. That's wonderful. Yes.
Because we know that if for at any level of learning, if a kid or adult student, anyone learning something, is not confused a little bit at the very least, they're not learning anything. Because
Right.
if they're not
Right.
confused, that means they're not kind of trying to rethink a concept or a precept or
Right.
whatever it is. And so in my classroom, this is another area that I think anti-fragility plays into it. I want to see what you think too. In my classroom, another area that I have to use these principles is getting very young singers, because my kids start at age 14 at school.
Okay.
So getting very young singers past that, what is sometimes a crippling anxiety of making any kind of noise in front of anyone.
Yeah.
And that is the high school teachers all that are listening, all are probably nodding their head already and know that that is one of the hardest parts about our job. When
Yeah.
most of the time the college directors get people when they're at the very least phonating already, whereas a 14-year-old oftentimes is so scared that when they take a breath to have it to make a sound, their vocal folds are literally not even touching. Like it,
Isn't
they're,
this amazing, Chris, that what you're talking about has nothing to do with singing though?
oh, it's all in the
Weirdly.
head.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like weirdly, that's what a conductor has to do, is be a
Mhm.
psychiatrist too
Yes,
for weird. It's
absolutely.
crazy. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I've seen a lot of conversation about things like that on Facebook groups and different chat, conversation boards with other colleagues. And you mentioned being a contrarian to the profession, and I feel like this is an area where I am a contrarian to the profession, also
Yeah.
in the sense that I see absolutely no reason to hold that kid's hand. So my um, because I care about them, I want them to experience what it will feel like when they finally just suck it up and do it.
Hmm.
Because and I've been doing this a long time, and I've taught now over 2,000 students. So my sample size is pretty small or pretty large,
Yep.
in the sense
Sure.
that I've been interacting with this type of problem now for 17 years, and I've seen the difference between how a kid reacts when they are told, in this class we sing in front of each other, and then they start crying, and they will sometimes have a panic attack. And I think the consensus is, well, that you got to make sure each kid gets to do what makes them feel comfortable. You don't want to put them in a situation where they might feel uncomfortable. And I'm sitting here thinking, no, actually, I'm trying to make them uncomfortable, because what they will then experience is an overwhelming sense of accomplishment where they stared at something in the face that they feared intensely, even though it's an irrational fear. It's still an intense fear that for a lot of people is real. And then I help them overcome it by giving them no out. And what in my experience over years of doing this is that in almost every case, that fear for my students usually only lasts a couple weeks at the beginning of the school year. And by the time they've ripped off that Band-Aid a couple times, they are singing in front of each other. They are singing without a breathy, uncoordinated onset. They are sight reading, and we do all of our sight reading a cappella. So there is something to that idea of, if you call it harm, you're calling it harm only in the super immediate short term.
And when I say it, I meant it in a weird, like the book says, and in a humanity vaccination way. That's what I know that there is. I really hope people don't fixate on that, because we're talking about, yes, it's just a language semantic issue. And what's funny about what you were saying though is these kids, and we're still kids, Chris, you and I, and the rest of us listening, we're afraid to be found out to be frauds. That's, I think, what we're afraid of. We're afraid to open our mouth and to be seen to be what we really are, which is just faking it until we make it, And the truth of the matter is that what you're doing is you're exposing them to, yes, take that step, yes. And then what they realize when they open the door is that everybody is a fraud. And we're all in this together. We're all figuring this thing out together. And the people that would make fun of them are the real problem, in life. And so I think that's so awesome that either through some sort of overt encouragement or pushing them out onto that small stage, that's the harm, or that's the harm that you're talking about. The uncomfortability of that moment.
It's a stimulant for them to grow.
That's right. It's a vaccine. That is the vaccine. And guess what? They become more anti-fragile. They become better. They become robust first, and then they become better. I think.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And I think the challenge for some teachers, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here by talking to you about this, because you're kind of on board with the concept. But for those of you listening, maybe who still aren't sure, I've got a student who's freaking out from an anxiety attack in my classroom, who just does not want to sight read, does not want to sing so that other people can hear them, and I don't want to turn them off to singing.
Yes.
Then what I would tell that person is, I would say, in what time frame of their broader life would you like to not turn them off for singing? Because my argument would be that in the short term, by letting them not do the activity that makes them nervous, you will give them a better impression in the short term of your class as a choir, because you will tell them what they want to hear, and they will then say, "Oh, yeah, he's a cool teacher. He doesn't make me do things when I'm scared."
Right.
In the short term, you will win that battle, but then they're not going to become a very good singer in almost every case, because you do have to. Singing is a thing you have to practice. You have to physically do it in order to sing it well. And so if you push them through that phase by giving them no option. This is something I'm fortunate my guidance counselors support me on this too. So when they cry, go to the office and cry because Mr. Muntz made them sing, then they send them right back and say that that's just what you do in his class, and you signed up for it. It's an elective, that kind of thing. Then they get through that phase, and they become so much better, usually within a short period of time. That's what hooks them on the singing experience, not because they were made to feel comfortable. It's because they're made to feel powerful.
Right. One thing that I might add that somebody might think is, what if somebody has a legitimate, professionally diagnosed anxiety disorder? And what I would say is, look, we're teachers that teach a wide variety of students, and we should we have to be creative in some cases. I think we just have to be, and that doesn't mean they get a way out. I'm just saying that we need to be creative about how to frame things.
Yep.
We have to be creative with how to the timing of things, but you can do it in a way that still doesn't give them a way out, still gives them the vaccination, still helps them become anti-fragile, even if there's seriously different stakes at play.
Yep.
And so I think you'd agree with that there are ways, and not every way is everybody's way, and that's okay. I think you as a teacher, that's what you have to do, is to be creative.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. I can think of, like I said before, out of the couple thousand students I've taught before, I can count on one hand in all that amount of time the students that their anxiety was so bad and diagnosed anxiety disorder type situations that were never able to get through that little stage with me.
Sure.
But that's probably 2 or 3 kids ever.
Yeah.
And hundreds of them, because that's the world we live in now, have some kind of anxiety disorder diagnosis.
Yeah.
So you're right. And so what I've done over the years is I've come up with lots of different tricks and lots of different ways to get them to do it. One of them is that I know that for a performance anxiety type situation, in most cases, the biggest moment of fear for a person is right before they sing. It's that moment, like, I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to start singing, and then everything seizes up because I'm really afraid. So one of the things that fixes probably 80% of those situations is that I tell them, I'm going to stand right next to you and I'm going to start with you.
Oh, good.
Start singing with you, but then you don't know when. I'm just going to eventually fade out and you're going to keep going.
Chris, what you're saying is genius too, because what you're doing is you're saying you're not alone. That's it. That's all you're saying.
Yep.
I mean, but it's not like you're not alone. Believe me, trust fall. I'm behind you. It's not that. You're literally doing it with them. So in a weird way, you are holding their hand to a degree.
Yeah.
But it's like bike riding with a kid.
And then I just walk away.
You've got your hand on your back, and then
you let go.
You let go.
Let go. Yep. And it works in almost all the cases. The most extreme ones I've ever had to do, where I'll tell a kid, you're not getting out of this. You're still going to sing, but you can go and, like, the door of the classroom, you can go step on the other side of the door, but you have to leave it open a crack so we can still hear you.
Okay.
And that fixes so the more severe ones that, like, I just can't do this in front of people. I'll say, okay, so what if we could hear you, but we can't see you? Does that make it easier? And in almost all cases, they will. And then, so I know we're not supposed to touch students in high schools, but if a kid's crying, I'm going to touch them. And so I'll come up, it's usually a freshman girl and she's going through her, I usually just have them sing like My Country 'Tis of Thee or something, it's something really easy that they know. And they'll start crying. And sometimes I'll just go up and kind of link arms, like the You're Not Alone thing. And I'm going to stand right next to them and I'll just sing so only I can hear you. And which, of course, I know that everybody can hear if they're singing really softly. And we do other, group activities where it's like, any kind of, if I even smell that you are making fun of each other during this time, this is your warning. You're getting detention.
Absolutely.
We're gonna support each other. So I think what they're learning in instances like that is they are learning their own strength, and that's the anti-fragile aspect, I think.
We're talking about this more and more, and I'm just thinking how sad we are at this time where we're all so self-sabotage, where these kids sign up to sing in a choir and they don't want to sing in a choir. In a weird, you know what I'm saying? In a weird way.
They'll say they want to sing with people. They just don't want to sing.
But then they don't sing with people either.
Right. They hide. Their voice hides in the choir.
It's tragic. And I think it's getting worse. I think so.
In my experience, I don't see that it's getting worse, actually.
Okay, good.
But there's other, that doesn't mean that it's not getting worse, like, on a grand scale. We live in kind of like a little choir Disneyland where I've got like a,
Kansas City Disneyland. That's right.
Feeder system things where I know all the
Yeah,
kids
right.
before they come in, and
Right.
they've been singing in choirs like with teachers that I collaborate with, and we, it's a whole thing. So it's really cool. So I don't see it because we raise the kids to know what they're getting into when they come,
Yeah.
to
Right.
the high
Right.
school, and I'm fortunate and privileged to be in that situation. But here's what I do see. I think the argument that kids make when they don't want to sing in front of people is, well, I signed up to sing with people. I didn't sign up to sing by myself. And then we have to talk about how you're right, but in order for me to teach you as an individual, which I have a whole other episode on the show about,
Sure.
really
Right.
about
Sure.
finding that individual in the choir. I can't teach you unless I know what you sound like,
Right.
because
Sure.
I can't help you. So there's plays into that growth mindset. Like, there are going to be things about your voice that when we hear you sing, we're going to try to make better, because
Right.
that's why you took the class. You took the class so that my expertise in helping you fix certain things that you don't like about your voice, but I can't help you fix it if I can't hear it. And that's usually where they start to buy into it. It's like, oh,
Right.
it's like a free voice lesson. That's what it is. And so I think that's paid off for me a lot
Yeah.
at the high
Yeah.
school level, is that idea. So I encourage people to look into this concept, because there is quite a bit of psychological research behind it. This is not just two guys, Eric and Chris, like ranting about how we should be meaner to our kids.
No.
There's
No.
quite a bit of research that this is what is best for people.
Yes. And I mean, this is one of many subjects that deserve time in your mind. And again, one of the reasons we started and I think this is the reason you started this podcast, is because we all need to think about this more.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just go into the year and think, well, what spiritual am I going to do this year? I think we need to do other things. We're a start. And what we were finding is that, or thinking about, was that there was just small pockets around of people that were having these discussions. And it would be nice to start to try to get these concepts more into the thinking process of people. And that's what you're doing too. Just trying to get people to say, okay, let's go to the next level of thinking beyond, I got to get through today and get home,
and beyond, and it's beyond what people will get by going to an intercession at a convention.
Let's get right.
You can't like that. So that's, I believe, and this could also be because I'm getting old now, and I've been going to conventions now for so long that I no longer feel like I look at the list of things that are available and see anything that I really would learn anything from. And that's not an ego thing. That's just I've been to 7 of those almost exact same types of sessions before. I'm not going to get something new out of that. In fact, I've already been to that same Patty DeWitt sight reading session like 5 times. So I'm not going to go to that one again. So instead I'm like at the bar with my friends or whatever. So
that exact comment is proof of what I'm talking about too, is that we just aren't thinking about it as a culture, as a genre of music. Choral music as a whole, I don't think, aren't thinking this way, or there's not enough of us thinking this way about some of these.
I would love for there to be a body of sessions at a national convention where there are in-depth philosophical roundtable discussions between people that don't agree.
Yeah, sure.
That's something I don't believe I've ever seen. Because if a in-depth philosophical movement in the choral profession is being discussed at a convention, which is rare, but if it is, it's being presented as, this is the right answer now.
Yeah.
This is now how we do it. And I think that, the beauty of a podcast is that we can bounce back ideas back and forth between 2 people or 3 people or 4 people or whatever it is.
Right.
And have it be productive even if we don't agree on how to apply the concept or whatever. And ultimately, that's the only way you learn.
That's right. And
It's the
weirdly enough, we're meta talking about anti-fragility.
we are.
We are,
Yeah.
by having a conversation, even about not agreeing or something, that is the vaccine for the
Mhm.
future as well.
Yep.
What is that? What is the manifestation of anti-fragility? Would be, I am more capable of being civility. I'm more capable of listening. I'm more capable of just being human, and also more capable of not arrogantly thinking I have all the answers. You know.
And you said something a second ago, though, that I want to zero in on because you kind of said it in passing about us as teachers not feeling like we know everything.
Yeah.
And here's how I would point at that. I would point at that by saying we have to be willing as teachers to apply the same anti-fragility mindset and growth mindset to ourselves
Mm.
that we are applying to the students. Because
Mm.
if we don't lead by some kind of an example, we also are a weaker example.
Right.
So, for example, I did an episode. My episode 5 was called "What I Suck At."
Yeah.
So just me talking for 45 minutes about things I suck at, and my students I've been making an effort. So before I even started a podcast, this has been something I've been working on at school. I've been working on talking more openly with my students about things that I feel like I'm not good at in the moment. Guys, if I'm going to be as hard on you as I am,
Mm.
then I think that it's only fair if you see me learning too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's again, like you said it before, we have to show that we're in this together. And so I started thinking, this was probably 2 or 3 years ago, maybe now, where I was standing in front of my most advanced choir at the school. There's probably 100 voices, and they can all, sight read at a college level. Probably it's this awesome thing. And so there are kids in there that some of them are better music readers than I am because they come in with perfect pitch, or they come in having 10 years of cello experience, and they have a musical savant kind of brain. And I get these kids almost every year. There are people in here who can hear faster than I can if we're in tune or out of tune. So I'm not going to be the gatekeeper this year for those types of things. We're going to lean on her. And then I would also say things like, I'm pretty good at hearing like whether or not a chord's in tune, and I'm pretty good at imagining how a musical phrase should go, and that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of going to be my strength. But I'm not super good at reading like really complicated syncopated rhythms and triplets and tied triplets across a hemiola and all these different things. But we've got some drumline kids
Mm-hmm.
that can read that rhythm the first time,
Right.
and when we come across those rhythms, I'm going to have him do it. I'm going to have him
Sure.
demonstrate that. So we started this at my school probably 2 or 3 years ago, where the kids are just used to it. They're used to me talking about, like, yeah, there's still going to be times where I'm claiming to be right about something and there's a disagreement, but but largely they know that I'm willing to say, you know what, wow, that sucked. I'm pretty dumb. We're going to try that again. And what I've noticed about that,
Yes.
it has made me better.
Mm.
It's made me better at all the things I thought I sucked at. I'm starting to get better at them, which to me is only proof that this anti-fragility idea works. It's
Right.
because when I opened myself up to that, because it's really uncomfortable, by the way, to stand in front of a bunch of 15-year-olds when you have a master's degree in conducting and talk about all the things they're better at you than, or better
Yeah.
than you at. It's kind of hard. You like have to like work your way up to that. And once I did it, though, it was like this weight lifted off, and I could start talking freely about the things that my deficiencies, and then I was able to start growing them, which I found interesting.
I just think it's so, all of this is tying all together about the go back even a few minutes here where we're talking about the fear that we all have. It's not just our kids that are afraid to be found out, And so I think, there's an old adage, I think it's the double or the AA adage, the first step is admitting that you have a problem or something.
Right?
And in a weird way, the first step towards being anti-fragile is admitting that you're fragile, or admitting that that you aren't the gate, as you said, a wonderful word, the gatekeeper of all things.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do this all the time. I mean, if it's literally my mistake, I will say it to the choir. Oh, that's my fault, to the choir. And I think a lot of people in the choir that I direct are surprised by that, because they've been used to some other things, saying, "Oh, most conductors, they want, even if it isn't, they'll stop and not blame themselves for the error or something,
Mm-hmm.
But just here's what happens: nothing. That's what happens.
Yeah.
That we just do it again. Nobody
Right.
says anything.
Yeah.
Guess why? They're like, "Yeah, that's correct. It was your error, and we don't hate you.
Right.
Let's do it again."
They respect you more.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's just move on with life. It's called practice. So I think that's part of it, is just, just being a human being and saying it's okay to be that. I think that's part of the battle here in this anti-fragility conversation. And, most of the other conversations that you have on your podcast and that we're having, circle around some of these issues a little bit about just, being more human, more humble, more real, less worried, work harder, um, uh, just caring about your craft differently, thinking deeper. All these things sort of circle around about just being better people.
And it gets under the psychology of the rehearsal itself too.
Yeah.
That when you're willing to open yourself up and be a more authentic person in the rehearsal,
Mm-hmm.
which is another thing I've talked to a lot about with young teachers that ask me advice, is how quickly, and this is what I usually tell them, I said, how quickly do you think you could work towards being 100% yourself while leading a rehearsal? Meaning you don't have to put on your like professional conductor persona
Mm-hmm.
to
Sure.
go lead the rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually confusing for young teachers, because I think we learn the opposite of that in college.
Yes.
We learn how to behave like an academic, and then we step up in front of our choir, and we have this persona that we think they expect, which is basically I'll call it the bow tie persona.
Yeah, sure.
No offense to all my Missouri State friends. It's cool that you wear your bow ties, but this is a metaphor for bow ties. The bow tie persona, which is
There's nothing wrong with a bow tie.
Right. No, but it's formal. It's formal. It's front facing.
Yeah.
Meaning you're keeping your most durable part between you and the choir, and there's a separation of the personality. And the reason I tell young teachers that's so important is to try to shed that for a couple reasons. And you touched on it and made me think about this, is that it makes you less stressed out. Mm-hmm. At some fundamental level, when you don't have to put on a mask for what many of us is 7 or 8 hours of our day,
right,
then your stress level about your job is going to start to go down, because you can know that your students are accepting you for who you are, flaws and all.
Sure.
And you don't have to put on this facade for them as they go. So here's my question to you.
Yeah.
Would you say, because I want to hear about this too. In fact, you just started a new job, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Where are you now?
I just moved to Des Moines, Iowa, and teach at Drake University.
That's what so I knew it was Drake, but I could never remember where Drake is. I knew it's somewhere in the Midwest.
It is in the Midwest.
We're not too far away from each other.
No, we're not. All the things that we've been talking about lead you, one, to become more anti-fragile against when you get pushed off the table and you as a glass, moving to a new school or being in front of the next year's kids that you don't know, that's you being pushed off the table. When you hit the ground, what are you like? Do you break? Do you just maintain, or do you become better?
Mm-hmm.
when you walk into class, are you worried about how you're being perceived? This is that. I'm worried about everything coming in at all angles. Instead, you said, I'm not going to think about me. I'm going to do what I would do at the end of the year, which is everything else, because you're comfortable. Imagine that you're comfortable at the beginning of the year. Why are you comfortable? Because of that trust. And you're not worried what they think of you because But what if you just didn't, you pretended that existed at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, it's a mindset choice.
It's a choice. That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's, I think we're very successfully now, I think, tying these all these ideas all together in a way that I like, because, like I said, it's a little, we're getting into the classroom now.
That's right.
With how these ideas apply. And one of the things I see that is one of the inspirations for me starting this show is that I do see a lot of teachers, especially young teachers, now that I'm kind of on the second half of my career sloping down, that I look back and I see a lot of young teachers coming in and they jump on the Facebook group and talk about how stressed they are about their job and about how maybe this is not the right thing for them. And maybe, I don't have administrators that support me, or my students aren't good enough, smart enough, whatever, to do this or this, and
right,
and all of that. And so it makes me ache a little bit, because I've been really fortunate in the job that I've had, my current job, but I've had other jobs that sucked. So I've been there. Like, I know what that feels like, but at the same time, I feel like I am so in love with and happy with and at home in my own skin in my job, that I feel like there are things that I've done that were choices that helped me get there. And one of the things that my goals of having conversations like this is I feel like they can be helpful to people that aren't feeling as secure in their own skin as it sounds like you and I are. But I also don't, I want people to have a growth mindset about it, whereas if you have a fixed mindset, you listen to a conversation like this, you might say, well, that's them. They feel good about themselves or about their conducting jobs that they have. They feel like they can be themselves,
right,
but that's just them. That's not, that couldn't apply to me. Well, that's a fixed mindset. And what I want to point out to people is all these philosophies that we've been talking about. I feel like I'm a happy person in my own skin because I've studied philosophy, because I know that I'm an inherently flawed, screwed up person on the inside, but I'm able to do stuff that I do in spite of that, because I've learned by reading how great people have thought about thinking to help rewire my own thinking.
Right.
To me, that's what philosophy is.
I'll add this to that. I had lunch with Donald Nguyen in Wisconsin, who weirdly moved to Oshkosh for some insane reason. I don't know. And he's retiring in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And we had lunch while I was still living there. And I actually was talking about some frustrations of mine. This was before it's a natural thing to do, y'all. Okay. What Chris just described, what you just described, is a natural thing to do, to have frustrations with everything. Okay. It's natural. Great. I think the key here is to ask, why do I have them? Okay. That's the real question, is why do I have these frustrations? Not how do I get out of them? It's why do I have them? But so he said the key to his success and the key to his joy, because he's a very joyful guy, very successful, was that he always tried to make what his dream was happen where he was. He didn't go, well, I'm waiting for that next one because over there it's going to be better. Instead, he just assumed that this was where it was at. And he tried to make it happen there, at that place. And that really moved me, because I was like, well, I'm thinking about start doing this, but I don't know how it'll work here. Instead, and what I was experiencing was why am I having the frustration? Fear. Or why am I frustrated with this? Selfishness. Or why am I doing this? Jealousy. So when you ask, why am I so worried or unhappy, or something's going wrong in your classroom, maybe just first ask, okay, why am I feeling this way? And then what it might expose is something in you that maybe you need to do a vaccine to, add a vaccine against this anti-fragility thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't just about not complaining. It's about doing what we talked about before, thinking deeper, talking to other people, arguing about things and learning something. And maybe the biggest one that I love is, I call it throwing spaghetti on a wall. What it is you just try stuff. And if it fails, this is the big part. Who cares? Let it go and try again. Okay?
Yeah.
But the worst thing you can do is say, oh, it's terrible here. XXX, XYZ is happening and I don't know what to do about it. But guess what? Nobody knows what they're doing. Okay? We're all just trying stuff. And some of it really works. And then you learn, and then you do it again next time, and it either works again or it doesn't. And you just grow. It's this growth mindset thing. And so that's what I encourage from as a conclusion to this bit, this talk here, is just to be encouraged. To be encouraged. And it isn't just Chris and I have it all together. It's the opposite. It's like, yeah, okay, we're so comfortable because we realize that it's okay to fail. I think that's half of it. And it's also okay to not be the best ever.
Yeah, I'm comfortable because I've made so many assumptions that I'm wrong about so many things, and or have just flat out told myself that I sucked at a thing, or like I said earlier, told my 15-year-old students that I suck at a thing. That it's almost as if I've intentionally, and it was intentional, but it was as if I've kind of saturated myself with all those negative and unsure feelings, so that I knew what they felt like, so that when they start to creep up on me, I recognize them and I know how to categorize them now. So
I listened to your podcast, sorry to interrupt, that podcast, and I do want to caveat something for the listener. When you go listen to it, you'll notice something though that Chris does, which is he doesn't say he sucks at something in a depressive fashion. There isn't like oh, woe is me. It's just a pragmatic, these are my strengths and weaknesses. That's super important to remember. There's no, oh no, I'm blah. No, you just say, here's what it is. Here's the reality of the situation. It's fine because it can be solved.
Yeah.
Or maybe it can't be.
And I try to balance it with something that I'm good at.
Yeah, great.
In the same way we do with our students. We always hear about, like, you got to give criticism sandwiches or whatever, with like a compliment and a criticism, and then you can maybe say something encouraging again afterwards.
I give parfaits, criticism parfaits.
That's important. Yeah, that's good. But I think that's something. One of the reasons I think many people aren't willing to go through the process that we're describing on themselves, is partly because are so wrapped up in what other people think of us as just it's almost inherent in humanity that we get a lot too much of our self-worth from what other people think of us. And so when we start to reveal those flaws, that it might lower our social stock, our professional stock. The choir profession does it too. It's the whole reason we have to make our bios look the most amazing we can possibly make them look. And you gotta put the Carnegie Hall trip your kids did, even though we paid for it going or whatever.
Hey, if you're interested, I'm open. I'm just kidding.
Right.
I'm just
you gotta put that stuff in there because not because it's who we are, it's because it's who we feel like other people need to see that we are.
Right. Sure.
And so my whole system, I don't have a system in the sense, I'm not writing a book or anything, but my whole system is dismantling that for myself, little piece by piece by piece, to where I actually am starting as I'm about to turn 40. And so this is like kind of a turning point in my midlife crisis.
It's going to be fine, Chris. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, I will see the other side of the hill.
You will.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm starting to dismantle this part of myself where I feel like when I talk about this stuff with people, like where I say that I'm open about my mistakes and stuff, I feel like still people don't believe me, and they think that it's like just me blowing smoke as another way to virtue signal. But here's the reality.
Yeah, right.
I just really don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. And that was not true about me 5 years ago. That was not true about me 10 years ago. In fact, I think I would say that I probably only made my first mistake of my whole life at age 27, was because that was when I would admit that I made mistakes.
Got it.
Was for for the first time. I was super cocky, headstrong, like would not show anyone any weakness ever as a younger man. And now, because I'm kind of pulling these things for myself one at a time, I feel like I'm more open. I'm more emotional with my kids. I'm more vulnerable with them. I'm more vulnerable with my students at school, with my wife. It's something that spins out into every aspect of my life.
What I love about this is what's so funny is that the way that you were was fragile. And now that you're fragile, you're anti-fragile.
Uh-huh. Yep. It's because
it's so awesome. Myself. You just turned it upside down.
Yeah.
You just turned it upside down.
Yeah.
I think people would go, ooh, he's more vulnerable. That means he's more fragile? No. It's exactly the opposite. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your chances of, not you, Eric Barnum, but you, person out there.
Yeah, right.
Your chances of hurting my feelings because you don't like me is now almost zero. And that's true, because I've crafted enough narrative in my head now to know that it's impossible for everyone to like me. It's impossible. People are too different. But I know there are people who love me a lot.
Sure.
And that's what I need to cater to. I need to foster those relationships. And so what you say is true. It's like when I was 27, I won't quite say that I was very Trumpian, in the sense
you were. I'm just saying you were fragile, though.
Right, but what I say when Donald Trump when I say Trumpian, what I mean is his persona is somebody makes fun of him, even a totally insignificant person on Twitter who makes fun of him, and he freaks out. Right. Like he responds and hits him back, and this whole thing, and that is. But most people would look at him and say he's so gruff and tough, and like that. Right. But that's exactly your point. I think is that he's fragile.
Oh, I will say this. There's a pastor that I know. His name is Timothy Keller, lives in New York. And he said the coolest thing, when people ask the world or ask what's wrong with the world right now, the best thing that you could say is me. I'm what's wrong with the world. And it's a quote. It's not okay. I'm not sure I'm what's wrong with the world, but if you were to say that, there's two things I'd like to add. One, if you were to say that, it's an attitude and a mindset thing. Okay. It is a look. Again, I'm not afraid to be seen to be a fraud. Okay. It's okay. And I'll start with myself instead of pointing the finger everywhere else. I'm just going to start with me, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's, again, like when you're conducting and it's your fault, it's okay to say, everybody, that was my fault. Let's do it again. That's what that means. Everything was the second thing, though, that I want to add very carefully would say there's a layer that I add personally, which is I sometimes don't even trust what I'm saying about myself, too.
Yeah.
So it isn't just, it's okay what everybody says, because I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, great. Sticks and stones can break my bones, it's fine. But I'm anti-fragile, so they will just make me stronger. No, I'm kidding.
Uh-huh.
But I found that I lie to myself a lot sometimes. And so I need to protect myself from that too, by carefully vaccinating myself against myself sometimes too. That's a different podcast for another day, but it adds a complexity. But I be careful to sometimes not believe. It's not just even believing your own hype. It's about believing what you think about yourself, because it might not be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I think that's external also. I think that works both
yeah,
ways.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's
That's what I'm saying.
the assumption at all times that the thing you claim could be wrong
Right.
is so important to doing the opposite of that, which is finding truth. Because even though you might say, even when you reach something that's new to you as a truth, you are
Mm,
still going to put it through that ringer of, well, I could still be wrong.
mm.
And ironically, through that anti-fragile, this is now anti-fragility of the intellect that we're
Sure.
talking about,
Yes, sure.
is that you are more likely to be filtering away, pulling out your implicit biases, pulling out your confirmation bias tendency, which everyone is subject to. But I find
And
this.
straw men and
Uh-huh.
all these other illogical fallacies along the way too that we all fall prey to.
Right, yeah, and I think it's what I've noticed is that even on like topics of just very cold and clean academic type discussions in the choral world, where I might have a contrarian opinion to what I feel like is what most people believe about the way the voice works, or the way we choose our intonation methods within an ensemble. Or I mean, there's all kinds of things that I think that my local colleagues call the Muntz brand of doing things that so like everyone else so doesn't believe what I
Sure.
believe.
Okay.
And so the way I think of it though is I have conversations with people about why I think a choir should do X, Y, and Z, and they interpret that as, well, he just has it's his way or the highway. And I'm like, well, no, actually, the reason I think what I think is because I've put everything I think through a ringer that is the assumption that I don't know anything that I'm talking about. And I'm going to go try to
Mm,
find the science behind it. I'm going to go try to find the research that's the most current. I'm going to go try to find whatever it is that will prove me wrong. And I'm going to try to formulate a new opinion based on that. And so when I finally have a conversation with a colleague, I've kind of already gone through that process.
sure.
And I have an assistant at the high school, and she's one of my former students, and we're starting to have some of these conversations where, like, I want you to come here and work as a colleague. Like, I'm not going to make all the decisions. I want you to make some decisions. But if you have an idea that is different than how I've decided we're going to do it, you're going to have to prove it. You're going to have to go through the ringer I went through, which
Mm,
is, if you're going to say that we're going to now do a different, um, let's say, I'll just pick something dumb. We're going to move to law-based minor instead of do-based minor. Okay,
okay.
let's have that conversation. But you're going to have to prove to me that your way is better than my way.
Well, let me ask you a question though to challenge you.
Yeah.
What if there's a possibility that some ideas, and they're not all that in the world, believe me, I am one that believes that truth exists totally and absolutely. But what if there are some cases where the paradox of both and exists instead of either or?
Yeah.
That it's right. And I think that you believe that. Like if you, that it isn't even circumstantial, is that both can work at any given time. That's probably part of the problem is that when people go, it's his way or the highway, that doesn't mean that you can't fully believe in your idea and it works perfectly. But some guy on the other side of the country has this amazing thing happening and it also works. And then you talk to him like years later and you say, how did you do that? And it was exactly the opposite of you.
Right.
That's possible. So I think, but that being said, I would suspect though that guy on the other side of the country that's doing this is doing the same sort of thinking methods that you're doing. They're not just willy-nilly just happening by chance on it. So what was so good is that again, I think I think the main thing we're talking about tonight is processes. The process is important. Is even more important. The process that you go through to come to a decision, the process of becoming anti-fragile, the process of gaining humility or stuff like this is super important.
Yeah.
As important as the outcome, even. Because the outcome results from a particular type of process.
Right. Well, and that's that's actually so much of a better way of saying what I was trying to say before, which is that if I'm going to tell my colleague that I would entertain switching to a different type of reading system.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to show me not that your idea is the superior one and is the truth one.
Yeah. Right.
But that if we're going to switch to a new thing, then I'm going to want to see that you've gone through the same process I went to get to my correct answer.
Right.
Which is the one made for me, because I don't want to make decisions based on, well, I saw somebody do that on Facebook and that's what I want to do now. Like, it's going to have to be more than that. It's going to have to be, okay, so what principles of physics are we dealing with here? What principles of psychology are we dealing with here that's going to make this a good choice? Let's dive into that. Let's talk about the music theory. Let's talk about vowel formants and all the different things that play when you're teaching kids to listen to music and hear themselves and all this kind of stuff. So so I think as long as there is, that's why I like the way you say it, because as long as there's a process that you can kind of apply consistently in your reasoning, then you are way more likely to arrive at, maybe not flawlessly reasoned, because no one can flawlessly reason, but closer and closer to consistent reasoning that's going to make you less stressed out about you're going to have less anxiety about what's coming next in your life.
Right.
Because you start to trust a process.
That's right. Notice we're coming full circle again. And weirdly, by the processes that you're talking about, you're doing that same thing. You're stripping away things. You're just stripping away things. You're gaining more and more the truth of the matter, whatever you're thinking about. And, less literature. The truth of the matter is that we should probably program better. Period. So I'm just saying, that's just an example that I bring up all the time. So you can apply the process, all these processes of anti-fragility and this process of stripping away. Again, we're going all the way circling back to saying we should just be thinking more.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Just think more. Just think more about it. Don't respond so much. I think we're responsive. And that's what we said before. We're responding to what other people think of us. We're worrying about everything around us. What if we just were more thoughtful, more engaged in doing what we're being paid to do, which is love kids, teach them to do something that we love and they love, and that's it. To a degree.
That is fantastic, and I think that's a great place to end. I would like to at some point tonight sleep, but I feel like I could probably keep talking to you for the entire.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go to bed.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you so much, and I hope your children make it through the night. I know they're at an age where they they might wake up sometimes and start bothering you. So
no, they're good. They're in the cage in the basement.
Chris. Oh, that's smart. You got
that.
Yeah, tie them by the ankle to the.
Oh wait, I shouldn't have said that. This will be. I'm kidding.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks again for sticking around to the end of an episode. This was a heady one. There's a lot to think about here, and I've been thinking and spinning my wheels ever since recording this episode a couple nights ago. It was a late at night episode. I've never started a recording at 8 p.m. before. Normally by 8 p.m. I'm tucking my kids in and I am heading to bed, but these are the pains that I'm enduring for you to have some quality content on the Choralosophy podcast. I'm also going to address here at the end, episode 18, the sight reading episode, which I mentioned on the talk with Eric just now, is the most popular episode on this show so far, which has led me to believe that you want more of that kind of stuff. So be looking and staying tuned for more how-to type episodes and getting into the particulars of how to execute a lot of these things and philosophical ideas in your classroom. Because, like I mentioned to Eric, that did surprise me a bit. I will say, though, to make those types of episodes is a lot more work for me. So it might take me a little bit of time to put that stuff together. The reason for that is that when I have a guest on, I don't have to prepare a script. We can just talk about some topics and then banter back and forth. Whereas if I'm alone, I have to really work hard to plan what I'm going to say. So be patient. I will come out with more of those episodes, especially now that I know that the listening community really reacted strongly to that and just had way more downloads, way more traffic on my website to that episode than any other. I'm still going to do the philosophical stuff, though. I hate to say, we're not just going to become a how-to channel. Because that's not where my heart is. So we will continue to do episodes like this and try to keep the ideas close to the classroom. And if you enjoy that, and if this is something that's important to you to see this Choralosophy community grow and continue, there are some big ways that you can help. One of those is liking, sharing, and leaving ratings on the devices that you listen to podcasts, sharing on social media. It's a huge way for me to avoid having to pay those Facebook advertising costs. Other ways that you can help is actually leave a review either on my Facebook page, Choralosophy Podcast on Facebook, or on the Apple app that you use, or any other types of podcast apps. Those are ways that actually increase the visibility of the show to podcast listeners. And finally, if you are very supportive of the show, the third and final tier is to sign on over at Patreon. Patreon has made it possible for me to add a subscription service to this channel. For as little as $3 a month, you can get once a month patron-only episodes. You can get the Patreon-only Choralosophy t-shirt sent to you. You can also get some private consulting through there, just some you and me time. There's a variety of things. Now that I'm doing these how-to episodes, that's where I will publish all of the materials that go along with those episodes. So head over to patreon.com/Choralosophy and check that out as well. And looking forward to broadcasting again next time. Thank you so much for listening.